Welcome to the Coach Barnabas podcast. It's time to take a few minutes and leave behind the stuff that drains us and recharge our batteries with some encouragement and insight. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Hi, and welcome back to Coach Barnabas, episode number 5. Thanks for joining me, and just kind of want to already just dig right in and jump into our topic today. Today I want to talk about, I'm calling it hope deferred. And what does that mean? Hope deferred is literally, I took that title from a verse in the Bible, out of Proverbs. And it says this, it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but desire fulfilled is a tree of life. And literally what that means is that when you hope for something and you have to wait and wait and wait, it literally can make your heart sick. You can become discouraged. People can become depressed. And I'm going to kind of share a little bit about a personal story of mine and how this comes into play. And particularly the second half of that verse that says, but desire fulfilled is a tree of life. So the hope deferred part, going to go back to, early in my adult life, and you can probably tell by the gray in the beard, I am well into my 50s. So going back to when I was 20, 21 years old, I went to college. I went to a small Bible college in Northern California, and there was a little fun motto when you go to a school of that size, where everybody kind of knows everybody. Um, and it's in a Bible college, you all have kind of it's assumed that you have a common foundation in your faith and your values, likely in your family, being involved in church and so forth. A lot of things that you have in common with people. So really, you're just walking around. You're going to bump into like-minded people and everything. So there's a fun little motto that they had was a ring by spring or your money back. So it was, in other words, it's like, hey, finding your potential spouse was probably going to be fairly easy, and it was for many. It was for some. It was not for me. It would be another 30 springs by the time anything happened for me. But I wasn't going to school for that. But that was kind of the funny joke and everything. And as the year went on, you'd see people getting engaged, and you'd see couples and all this stuff. But I wasn't ready for that, and that was fine. But as I reached my mid 20s, then I started kind of thinking about it, and it would be nice, but I was no longer in college, and so my social life was a bit limited. And as I've mentioned before, I'm a natural introvert. I'm not, one who, is super active in a social scene or anything like that. And certainly the bar scene was not my type of thing, which is another place people would go to meet people and socialize and stuff. Um, so my mid 20s came, my late 20s came. Um, and sure, you date, you do that kind of stuff, but relationships didn't last terribly long. You get into your 30s, and it seems like the pickings are getting slimmer, because people have already matched themselves up and found somebody, and you get to a point. And I remember thinking this. It's like it seemed, the longer I don't want to say the search, because I don't want to make it sound like I was just constantly, binoculars and this kind of thing. But it seemed like the longer this process took, um, the more you overthink it and more complicated it seems, because you look around everywhere you go and you see couples. You find people who found each other, and it gets to the point to where it's like it's pretty natural. It should be simple. People have been doing this from the beginning, right? And where two people find each other and they just want to be together. They want to spend their lives together, and they have kids and everything else. But for me, it was super elusive. No matter how much I wanted it, and I had encouraging people around me, and they said, Corey, this is going to happen for you. You're such a good guy, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. Thanks. But, now as you're reaching your 30s, the same people who I went to school with and everything else, they were having kids. And so they're talking about the miracle of childbirth and being a parent, and I'm so excited for them. And that's the hard part, is being excited for people who are living your dream. And at first it's easy, awesome, good for you. That's terrific. And it's sincere, it's legitimate. But as things go on and people are continuing to live your dream, and it's harder to get excited for them when that happens, because it's hard to take your eyes off yourself and what you're lacking and what you want. So that was kind of a lesson I had to learn, was to be sincerely and genuinely happy and celebrate with people who the good things you wanted for your life were happening in their lives. So, then you get to your mid 30s, you hit 40, and it still hasn't happened. And by this time, I'm almost to the point of giving up, right? And just like it's just not going to happen for me. And I had friends who still, Corey, it's going to happen. You're going to be a dad one day. And I had to be very honest and say, I don't know, because I'm 40 at this stage, and I'm thinking, if I had a kid tomorrow, I'm going to be in my late 50s by the time they're graduating high school. And the joke became, I probably shouldn't say this, but the joke became that, uh, my kids' diapers and my diapers ought to be changed at the same time. you know, uh, but, obviously that was a joke. But here we are, and the 40s come, and we're getting towards the end of my 40s now. And it just, I've pretty much given up. And by the time my late 40s came, my best friend asked me, and because I went to him and I said, I feel like um, maybe I need to look at dating sites on the internet or something like that. And I thought he was going to just roast me for even thinking that, um, because that's what he would normally do. But in this rare moment, he said to me, he says, "Well, how's what you're doing working for you?" And it was like, I mean, he's right. Because again, I don't go to social events. I wasn't into like singles groups or anything like that. Just I couldn't do it. So joined a website, and there was like a first month trial kind of thing. So I did that. Reached the end of the month, and it was very discouraging. You send somebody a note, and most of the time they don't even respond. Maybe they look at your pictures and they're not impressed, and who can blame them? Uh, but they just move on and to the next thing or whatever. So I reached the end of the first month. I thought, okay, I'll give it one more month. And so as I'm looking through now in starting my second month, I end up coming across this profile of this very pretty young lady who lived 3,000 miles from me. Again, I grew up in Northern California, and I find somebody with this really wonderful profile. I mean, her pictures were great. She's very pretty. Um, and I go and open up her profile and read it, and it was super different. It was unique, but it was also well written. It was funny. It was deep. It was a lot of different things. I was really impressed by it. But she happened to live in Rhode Island, and she even put in the opening of it is like, New Englanders only need to apply, kind of thing. And it's like, well, if for no other reason, I can just write her, just compliment her on having a unique profile, and having it be funny and engaging and just unique on its own merit. So I just sent her a message, an email, and say, "Look, I'm geographically challenged. I'm away over here in California, but I just wanted to tell you I really enjoyed reading your profile. It was funny, and it was, really cool. And I, whatever. I can't remember exactly what I said. I think she may have a screenshot of it somewhere, and but I don't know what happened to it. At any rate, I expected absolutely nothing in return, and sure enough, I think really the same day, maybe the next day, but I think it was the same day. She replied, and as these sites go, you don't put your actual name. Some people may have put their first name or something, but she used an alias, and I think I did too. I don't think I put my name, um, but when I sent the message, I signed my name Corey at the bottom, and when she responded, she sent something very nice back. She said she liked my profile too. It was cute. And then she signed her name at the bottom, and her name was Sarah Jane with a hyphen between them. Now, this sent little signals to me, and I'll probably go into more detail about our story in a future episode. But for the sake of this conversation, I just kind of want to talk about at least this part. Um, but my mom's name was Sarah, and her middle name was Jane. So I was kind of like, "Whoa, that's pretty cool." So that got a little ball rolling, and I messaged her back and said, "You're not going to believe this, but my mom's name was Sarah Jane, and it turns out that this Sarah Jane, that her first name is Sarah hyphen Jane." So that gave us a little bit of traction to just keep talking. And one thing led to another, in a technological sense. And we just kept talking and chatting. We just really enjoyed talking and connecting. And within a couple days, we were talking on the phone, or she gave me her Facebook ID, which was the next step. And then after that, we started talking on the phone, and it just grew and grew and grew to the point to where a few months later, I was flying out to Rhode Island to visit her and to meet her family. And she had two boys from a previous marriage, um, and we literally fell in love. And again, I'll go into more detail perhaps in a future episode, but understand that at this point, this is I am 48 years old when this begins. Okay. And so that hope deferred was had been very, very deferred. Let's put it that way. But what had been so elusive in my life was so precious, became something where that time it was just a preparation time for something that may never come. But and if you've ever been down this road, people inevitably ask you, "What is it you're looking for? What do you have a list of qualities that you're looking for?" And my list, I did have a list at one point. Well, I wanted to be this or that, or not have this and this, blah blah blah. But as time went on, I just said, I just want to recognize her when I meet her. I want her to have qualities that God wanted to have in my life. And that was really my list, is like, I just want her to be who God wants her to be. And I'd be okay with that. And I'd be happy with that. Now, fast forward, I end up moving out here. And by here, I mean, I'm in Rhode Island. I am coming to you from Rhode Island. So I moved from California to Rhode Island, where currently it is freezing. It is currently 27 degrees outside. Um, so uh, to leave warm California for the snowy and icy climate of Rhode Island, something special had to happen, and it did. So, hope deferred. So that's the first part I want to focus on. Is in your hope deferred, maybe something along those lines. It may be that you're looking for that special relationship. You'd hope, and you start to think maybe it's just not going to happen for me. And I can't say that it's going to. I couldn't guarantee you that I was going to. I had to accept the fact that perhaps it wouldn't. Um, but it may be something else. It may be something professionally. It may be something you want to buy a home. You want to have kids. It could be anything. Okay. As I'm saying this, you have things in your head that are popping up and say, man, that's something I've been hoping for a long time. But use that time and prepare yourself and better yourself. That even if it doesn't happen, you are going to be a better person because you've made the effort, because you've decided for yourself you want to improve yourself, you want to make improvements, even if it doesn't land you the hope and dream that you've always had. That if nothing else, you are going to be more satisfied with who you are and what's happening inside of your life. And but the second half of that Bible verse I shared with you is that, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. And again, it was many, many springs, spring by spring. I had to wait for 30 of them before I ended up meeting the woman who would become my wife. And when I met her, um, the tree of life had already been germinating, it had already been growing. I just was unaware of it. I was being prepared for this moment. I just didn't know it. And so when the time came, um, in more ways than not, I was ready. Earlier in my life, I absolutely wasn't ready. And I look back and I think, why didn't this happen sooner? Why weren't the circumstances different? And I wasn't ready. I wouldn't have been good. I wouldn't have been suitable to be a husband. And perhaps the people I was with, it would not have been, so many people get divorced and everything else. And perhaps that would have been me. And that might have devastated me. And there's so many things that didn't happen that I feel protected from. That the things I perhaps thought I wanted didn't happen. And sometimes that's the greatest gift that you be given is not getting what you wanted, what you thought you wanted. So keep that in mind. Is that you think you want something bad enough that sometimes you could want it so bad that you force it and you make bad decisions in the process because you become hasty. It's better to have hope deferred and to wait for the right thing than to push it and to force it, because that's when you end up ignoring red flags, or just trying so hard to cram the square peg into the round hole, and you end up miserable as a result and committed to something, and the only way out of it is either to just live with it and be miserable, or to go another route which can be expensive and emotionally um, destructive, could be destructive to other relationships and cause a ripple effect of destruction along the way. But at the same time, redemption can come out of that. Don't think that you're going to be defined and doomed because you have something in your background, in your past, that you made a bad decision and it caused certain consequences. But that doesn't mean you're stuck. Okay. So I want to again point you back toward hope. Okay. And because there is always another Bible verse is in the book of Jeremiah. It says that God has a plan for our lives to bring us, to give us hope in a future. Okay. And that's really, I stood on that verse for 30 years. Not just about finding a wife one day, but just in everything in my life, that he has good plans for me, for a hope and a future. Um, so that was something I stood on and had to remind myself even on dark days. But then that tree of life came and I was willing to risk it all. And again, we'll go into more detail in the future. But uh, when we finally got together and I was living here, it was still a couple years after that before we got engaged and got married. But not a Bible verse, but actually a quote from one of our country's founding fathers. In fact, he's known as the father of the revolution, Thomas Paine, had this quote. I'm going to read it, so I want to get it right. It says, "What we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly." In other words, things that come easy, we don't esteem it. We don't consider it precious because it comes easy to us. It's the dearness only that gives everything its value. Okay. And I love that quote because it's so true that things that come easy carry very little value in our lives because we didn't have to work for it. We didn't have to pay a price for it. Okay. And that price may be waiting and waiting, and waiting, developing and going through heartbreak and disappointment. But when it finally comes, you then realize how precious it really is and how valuable it really was to you. And that's the difference between cost and value. Cost, you could put a price tag on anything, and if you're willing to pay it, that's fine. But it's the value of it that carries beyond what the price tag is. And so for me, a cost was moving away from everything that was comfortable and familiar, including family members and best friends and everything that was, the climate and all the things that were familiar and comfortable for me and security for me, jobs and everything that was familiar, leaving that 3,000 miles in my rear view mirror and moving somewhere where I knew nobody and starting over at 48 years old was not easy, but it was a small price to pay for something that was infinitely more valuable to me. And since then, it hasn't all been easy. It hasn't all been unicorns and rainbows. But I have never had even a moment's regret in my life. And I've been here 10 years. Next month in March will be exactly 10 years since I moved from California to Rhode Island. And there's not been, even during the most difficult times, the times where I cried myself to sleep, where I had major question marks in my head, I never regretted it. I never. looked back and thought, man, I wish I'd never left. Never once. And so I just want to throw that out to you and just offer that as a ray of hope for you. And I hope that as I'm sharing this with you, that it comes at a timely moment in your life, that you're listening to it, and maybe you're facing a crisis point. Maybe you're at a breaking point, or you're just ready to give up and you feel hope is lost, but it's not. I just believe that in my heart, and I hope that this message lands on ears who need to hear this and need that encouragement and need that fuel to press on and to continue to drive, to continue to hope, and to continue. If you're a praying type person, as I am, continue to pray and just move forward in your life, and don't just give up and then settle and make compromises in your life. Don't do it. Don't do it. Continue to press on. That's my message for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again soon. Remember, be encouraged and be an encouragement. Talk to you again soon. Bye now.
Thank you for joining the Coach Barnabas podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your support by liking and subscribing to the podcast and setting up notifications so we can let you know when new episodes are available. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. Make a difference today.